Babylon wasn't conquered. It surrendered. Not because it was weak, not because it ran out of soldiers, because its own system made it impossible to fight back. October 539 BCE. The gates of Babylon are open, not broken, not burned. Open. The greatest city on earth, a city that has stood for 1,500 years, does not fall in battle. It doesn't even fight back. The Persian army walks in, and the citizens of Babylon line the streets to watch. This is the moment historians call the Conquest of Babylon. But that's not the right word. You can't conquer something that's already hollow. Today, we're going back to the beginning. Because this city, this empire, this idea of Babylon, it started as the most brilliant political experiment in human history. And it ended the same way all brilliant systems end. Not from the outside, from within. To understand what Babylon was, you need to understand what the world looked like before it existed. It's 2000 BC. Mesopotamia, the land between two rivers, is the most contested piece of real estate on the planet. The Tigris, the Euphrates. Two rivers that flood every year, deposit insanely fertile soil, and make it possible to grow grain in the middle of a desert. Whoever controls this land controls food. Whoever controls food controls everything. For hundreds of years, no one controls it completely. City-states rise and fall. Akkad, Ur, Lagash, Nippur. They fight. They trade. They absorb each other. The whole region is a system without a center. Like the internet before anyone built a search engine. There's data everywhere, but no one knows how to index it. In 1894 BCE, a king named Hammurabi founds a small city on the Euphrates. It's not impressive. It's not special. For the next 100 years, it's basically a minor power, surviving on diplomacy and geography. And then a man named Hammurabi inherits the throne, and everything changes. Hammurabi becomes king of Babylon in 1792 BCE. He's 18 years old, maybe younger. The records aren't precise. And for the first 20 years of his reign, he does almost nothing aggressive. He builds canals, he repairs temples, he keeps the peace, while his neighbors bleed themselves dry fighting each other. You see, Hammurabi is not a conqueror first. He's an engineer. He's watching the system, mapping its weaknesses, waiting. Then between 1766 and 1761 BCE, in a period of roughly 5 years, he moves. Larsa, Isnana, Mari, Assyria. One by one, methodically, almost surgically. In 5 years, Hammurabi goes from ruling one city to ruling Mesopotamia. But here's the part that makes him extraordinary. He doesn't just conquer, he integrates. Every city he takes, he sends in administrators, standardized weights and measures, standardized taxes, standardized language. He builds a postal system, a legal system, an infrastructure of control. He's not just taking land, he's building an operating system. And then, in approximately 1754 BCE, he does something no one has ever done before. He writes it all down. 282 laws, carved into a black diorite stele nearly 8 feet tall, placed in the Temple of Marduk in Babylon, where every subject could come, in theory, and read it. This is the Code of Hammurabi, and it is one of the most brilliant pieces of political engineering in human history. The laws cover everything. If a builder constructs a house and it collapses and kills the owner, the builder is put to death. If a man rents an ox and through negligence causes its death, he replaces the ox. If a woman wants a divorce, she can get one, with conditions. If a merchant charges more interest than the law allows, he loses the entire loan. There are laws about wages, about inheritance, about adoption, about slavery, about what happens if a doctor causes injury during surgery. Here's the key insight. These laws are not about justice. They are about predictability. For the first time in history, everyone in the empire could know in advance what would happen if they broke a rule, not because Hammurabi was merciful, because he understood something profound. People don't need a king. They need a system they can trust. Give people a predictable system, and they will work inside it willingly. And it works. Babylon becomes the center of the ancient world. Trade routes converge here. Knowledge accumulates here. Population grows. Monuments rise. For a brief, extraordinary moment, Babylon is the algorithm that runs civilization. Think about that for a second. One man, one set of rules, carved into stone. And for a moment, it actually works. Not for a decade, not for a century. For over 1,000 years. That's the part that should impress you, because the same thing that makes it extraordinary is what makes it fatal. A system that lasts long enough stops feeling like a system. It starts feeling like reality, and cages don't feel like cages when everyone is used to them. By now, Babylon looks unstoppable. The laws work, the trade works, the myth works. But everything you're seeing right now is exactly what will destroy it. But here's the question Hammurabi never asked. What happens to a system when the world it was designed for no longer exists? What happens when the rules outlive the man who wrote them? What happens is Babylon, 1,000 years of it, and the most ironic collapse in the history of civilization. Let's meet the two men at the center of this story. They never meet. They're separated by over 1,000 years. But they are, in a very real sense, the same story told twice. Hammurabi, born approximately 1810 BCE, sixth king of the first Babylonian dynasty. On the surface, a conqueror, a lawgiver, a builder. But what he really is a systems thinker. He doesn't trust charisma. He trusts infrastructure. He understands that empires built on personality collapse when the person dies. So he tries to build something that outlasts him. A set of rules, a mythology, an identity for his people. Babylon is eternal. His inscriptions say, Marduk chose us. It's not arrogance. It's a feature. If your citizens believe they are part of something eternal, they will act to preserve it. Nebuchadnezzar II, born approximately 634 BCE, the greatest king of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, the man who destroys Jerusalem, who builds the Hanging Gardens, who turns Babylon into the most magnificent city in the world. And here's the thing about Nebuchadnezzar. He also believes Babylon is eternal. He believes it because Hammurabi built a system convincing enough to survive 1,000 years. He doesn't see himself as building something new. He sees himself as fulfilling a prophecy. One man builds the belief, another man dies by it. That's the trap. When a system becomes mythological, it stops being a tool and starts being a cage. For almost 300 years after Hammurabi's death, Babylon declines. The Kassites take over, then the Assyrians. The city is sacked, rebuilt, sacked again. But here's the thing about a system this deeply embedded. Even conquerors adopt it. Every new ruler who takes Babylon within a generation starts calling themselves the protector of Marduk. They issue laws in the tradition of Hammurabi. They perform the Akitu festival. They become Babylonian. The city survives not because it wins militarily. It survives because its culture is a virus. Infectious, self-replicating. 605 BCE, Nebuchadnezzar II takes the throne. He is, by any measure, a military genius, an architectural visionary, a ruthless administrator. He sacks Jerusalem twice, He deports the Jews to Babylon. He rebuilds the city on a scale never seen before. The walls are so thick that chariot races are held on top of them. But now the complication. Nebuchadnezzar's legitimacy is completely dependent on one thing: the blessing of Marduk, the god of Babylon, the god Hammurabi put at the center of everything. And the priests of Marduk, after 1,000 years of accumulated power, know this: the priests control access to the divine, which means, in practice, they control the king. Hammurabi's masterstroke, linking political legitimacy to divine approval, has become a choke point. The king cannot act without the priests. The priests cannot be removed without destroying the king's legitimacy. The system is eating itself. Hammurabi's system had one job: produce a king who could protect Babylon. After 1,200 years of refinement, this is what it produced. And then comes Nabonidus, the last king of Babylon. And he is genuinely one of the strangest figures in ancient history. Nabonidus comes to power in 556 BC through a palace coup. He is not of royal blood. He has no divine mandate from Marduk. In fact, and this is where things get interesting, he doesn't like Marduk. His favorite god is Sin, the moon god, a regional deity from his mother's hometown. Think about what this means in context. For 1,000 years, Babylonian political identity has been fused with one god. Hammurabi's entire system, the laws, the myths, the rituals, are centered on Marduk. And the new king doesn't worship Marduk. He worships the moon. It gets more bizarre. In approximately 553 BCE, Nabonidus leaves Babylon, not for a military campaign. He goes to an oasis in Arabia called Tema, and he stays there for 10 years. 10 years. The king of the greatest empire in the world, the heir to Hammurabi's legacy, is essentially on a decade-long religious retreat in the desert. While he's gone, the Akichu festival, a sacred New Year ritual that renews the king's divine mandate, is suspended. For 10 years. The priests are furious. The people are confused. And a man named Cyrus the Great is building an empire to the east. Here's the critical question. Could Babylon have survived? Absolutely. Babylon had the walls, the wealth, the food stores. It had survived Assyrian invasion, repeated conquest, centuries of political instability. Before we get to the gates, let's be honest about something. Cyrus didn't just show up with a pamphlet. He showed up with the most powerful army in the world. A month before reaching Babylon's walls, his forces met the Babylonian army at the Battle of Apis. It wasn't close. The Babylonian military, already demoralized, already leaderless, was routed. Nabonidus fled. So let's be precise about what actually happened at the gates. It wasn't that Babylon couldn't fight. It was that, after Apis, it chose not to. And that choice was made by the priests, not by soldiers who ran out of options, by an institution that decided a foreign conqueror who promised to restore Marduk was preferable to their own king. The army was beaten, but the surrender was a decision. Those are two very different things. When Cyrus arrives at the walls of Babylon in October 539 BCE, he doesn't attack. He doesn't need to. He produces a cylinder, a clay document, announcing that Marduk himself has chosen him as Babylon's liberator. That Nabonidus had offended the god, and Cyrus has come to restore the proper order. And the priests, who have been locked in conflict with Nabonidus for years, open the gates. Babylon falls not to a siege. It falls to a press release, a better story, a rival system that understands the Babylonian operating system better than its own king does. Cyrus the Great walks into the greatest city in the world, and the city hands itself to him. Because the system, Hammurabi's system, had made the priests more powerful than the king, and the priests chose the enemy. Here's the brutal symmetry of this story. Hammurabi builds a system to make Babylon permanent. The system survives for 1,250 years, which is extraordinary, but in surviving, it calcifies. The rules become sacred. The priests become untouchable. The mythology becomes more real than the reality. By the time Nabonidus sits on the throne, Babylon is no longer a city. It's a religion. And religions don't adapt. They preserve. The Hanging Gardens, the Ishtar Gate, the Code of Hammurabi, which still sits in the Louvre today. These are what's left of a civilization that was, for a moment, the most sophisticated thing humanity had ever built, and then got stuck believing its own myth. So what do we take from this? Hammurabi's genius was understanding that systems outlast individuals. If you want to build something that lasts, build a system, not a cult of personality. That insight is still correct. But every system contains the seed of its own failure. The same features that make it powerful, its rules, its rituals, its mythology, become its vulnerabilities. A system that cannot be questioned becomes a prison. A myth that cannot be revised becomes a blind spot. Legitimacy that requires priests or algorithms or institutions or gatekeepers is legitimacy you've rented, not owned. Babylon didn't need Cyrus to destroy it. It destroyed itself, slowly over centuries, by doing exactly what its founder intended, following the rules, performing the rituals, maintaining the system. The most dangerous systems are the ones that work so well, for so long, that no one thinks to ask anymore. What happens when the world changes and the rules don't? After Cyrus, Babylon continues for another 200 years. Under the Persians, then Alexander the Great. Alexander actually dies in Babylon, planning to make it the capital of his empire. Even in death, Babylon absorbs its conquerors. The virus keeps running. Think about what that means. The city was conquered. The king was replaced. The empire dissolved. And still, the idea of Babylon kept pulling people in. That's not a footnote. That's the whole point. A system powerful enough to outlive the civilization that built it is the most dangerous kind of system there is. History has patterns, and we just decoded it. This was Historithm. See you in the next video.